What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we got the patch notes nice and early for the Season 3 update, which is coming this Wednesday for multiplayer. So in today's video, I wanted to go through these patch notes talking about everything that's non-weapon balance related. I may skim through some of the weapon balancing changes, but for those of you guys that have been around the channel for a while, you'll know that I like going into much more detail with this. I like actually testing pre-patch versus post-patch and showing you guys before and after. So for the weapon balancing, I am going to be holding off till we actually get the update. However, even outside of the weapon balancing, there's a good handful of excellent information to be sharing today. Keeping in mind, I'm just focusing on the multiplayer side of things, and we're not talking about the content that's coming since I've already covered that in great detail. So without further ado, let's dive into the most interesting part of this, and I was very surprised to see that they're actually following through with this. With Season 3, we're getting console-only crossplay settings, not just for ranked play, but also for unranked multiplayer or regular multiplayer public matches. And this is really good news for console players out there. And just a recap of how this works, since we have had access to this for ranked play, but just not public matches until Season 3. With this, in your crossplay settings, if you're a console player, you can now leave crossplay on, so therefore you'll play with any of the platforms, PC or the other console platform. You can turn console-only crossplay on, which means you'll be able to play with your console platform as well as the other console platform. So if you're on Xbox, you can turn console-only crossplay on, and that will allow you to play with just Xbox and PlayStation players. And then finally, you can turn crossplay off, or at least PlayStation will be allowed to. I'm not too sure if they're going to allow this for Xbox, since they usually want to encourage you to use your console crossplay settings for Xbox, but at least on PlayStation, you'll be able to turn crossplay off entirely, like we've always been able to do on PlayStation. And with this, it only allows you to play with your platform and no other platforms. Now, they do specify that the more you limit your crossplay options, the more likely it is to negatively impact your matchmaking queue times, which makes sense. You're playing with a smaller pool of players. But for me, I'm absolutely going to be turning this console-only crossplay on instead of turning crossplay off entirely, which is what I usually do, which just limits me to playing with PlayStation players only. In either case, like I said, for console players at least, this is excellent news. We have the ability to separate ourselves from PC players, and therefore effectively eliminate the possibility of running into aimbots and wall hacks. At most, we'll just have to deal with input altering devices like Cronus's and stuff, which is frustrating, but not nearly as frustrating as aimbots and wall hacks. And then also there is the argument of potential hardware advantages using PC over console. I have talked about this a lot in the past. I also understand that many PC players will be unhappy to see this news, since many console players will choose to turn this option off, which then limits the pool of players PC players can play against. But I think at the end of the day, the vast majority of the player base won't even realize that this setting exists. And therefore, I really don't think it's going to be limiting the pool of players all that much that have crossplay just turned on for all platforms. And instead, this is just a nice option that's available for anybody that's aware of it and chooses to turn this over to console-only crossplay. So I highly doubt this is going to totally kill off the player base for like lesser played modes for PC players. There's still going to be tons and tons of console players out there that will always just leave crossplay on entirely. And therefore, PC players will still be matchmaking in the largest pool of players overall. Now, I do have one concern with this, and this is something that many people have brought up. I don't have first-hand experience with this, but many people have mentioned that even when you disable crossplay on Xbox, you still end up playing against PC players that are playing on Game Pass. So I'm wondering if this option is going to resolve that issue or not, but I guess time will tell on that one. In either case, that was quite a big surprise to see in these patch notes. Next up, something the PC players will be happy to see is they're making improvements to the preloading shaders system. So you're going to be getting separate preloading shaders warnings depending on the game mode that you're playing, whether that's Warzone, multiplayer, or zombies. And apparently, they've significantly reduced the time required to compile shaders before launching a match. And that's a big one if true, because for the little bit that I have played on PC, it is kind of frustrating that you boot up the game and you're all ready to go, but you have to just sit there and wait till all the shaders are compiled before you can get into a match. And it's especially frustrating if your game crashes and you have to repeat that process all over again. They also mentioned they're adding a new menu widget in the lobby to indicate the progress of your preloading shaders to let you know when you're ready to play. As for a couple general adjustments here, the first thing is when you prestige, it will no longer reset your operator, your calling card, emote, spray, or gobblegum customization, which is great to see. It was very unnecessary to have that stuff reset because it's not like that's tied to your level or anything. That's just tied to your character. So I get that you have to like reset your loadouts, for instance, because you're starting back at level 1, but resetting which operator you have selected or your calling card, that just doesn't make any sense. So I'm glad they're finally getting on top of that one. And then they also address an issue where finishing move audio would continue to play after scrolling to a new tier in the battle pass. Next, for weapon balancing, like I said, we're going to be diving really deep into the details with actual before and after footage and graphics once we actually get the update. But I wanted to just point out and skim over a couple of the highlights here, because there's some big changes coming to the Goblin Mark II. That's going to see a massive fire rate improvement, which I am very, very happy to see, since we don't have a really fast firing semi-auto in this game. We finally will with the Goblin Mark II, but that's also coming with a damage reduction to compensate. We're also going to be seeing buffs across the board to Dragon's Breath and Slugs on shotguns, and hopefully they end up in a good state with that, because as of right now, more often than not, these attachments are actually just detrimental to your build on a shotgun. And then something a lot of people have been asking for a while now, the Jackal PDW will be seeing a slight range nerf. Now that's obviously not a comprehensive list of all of the weapon adjustments, just some of the highlights that I wanted to pull out here. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so you don't miss out on that proper weapon balance breakdown video coming in a few days. Next up, let's talk about movement a little bit. There's going to be a few adjustments coming to multiplayer. As you may or may not know, they're going to be making some very notable adjustments to movement on the Warzone side of things, but those adjustments aren't all coming to multiplayer. We are having separate movement adjustments for multiplayer. The first couple things here that are related, they're increasing the crouch to stand speed by 15% and the crouch to stand speed while aiming down sight by 39%. So you're actually going to be able to stand up a little bit faster from a crouch. Obviously, the fear with this is snaking will be making a big return. So essentially exploiting that animation of going from crouch to stand really quickly and repetitively, which creates a form of desync and makes you almost impossible to shoot. So time will tell on that to see if snaking will actually be back with this. I do plan on making a before and after video with that to see just how much of a change we're going to be seeing, especially from a third-person perspective. But then on top of that, they just mentioned they're increasing the directional sprint animation blend speeds for improved fluidity. So they're not actually changing how fast you move at all here, and this is just designed to make the animations look a little bit more fluid. And then on top of that, and most importantly for these movement adjustments, they're reducing our slide-in max speed scale, so the speed at which you start a slide, from 1.6 down to 1.55, so a very small nerf there. And then they're also reducing the slide max time from 0.7 seconds to 0.65 seconds. So they're just shaving a little bit of time off there. They are toning back the slide slightly, but just looking at the numbers, this is going to be a very minor adjustment. But of course, until we get our hands on it, we won't really know how this is going to feel. So time will tell on that, and I do plan on having a before and after comparison once we get the update. Next up for playlists, right at launch with Season 3, I'm happy to see they're actually giving us a Season 3 map mosh pit mode, so Barrage, Nomad, and Firing Range will be on that. And we're also getting Firing Range 24/7 at launch for Season 3. That's excellent. On top of this, something they mentioned before, but now we actually have an image of this, they're having a separate tab in the playlist selection for party game modes. And in this, they have listed Prop Hunt, Gun Game, Infected, Gunfight, and Sharpshooter, which is coming with Season 3. And I'm really happy to see that. Party games can be a nice change of pace, and it's nice to know that they've got their own separate tab, and likely they're all going to be here to stay from now on. After that, a quick note about spawns. They just addressed an issue where players could spawn directly on an active shock charge placement. So you spawn in already affected by a shock charge, which is obviously frustrating. That shouldn't be taking place after the Season 3 update. And then toward the end of the multiplayer section here, there's a good handful of UI fixes and adjustments here. Most of them are just purely visual bugs that aren't going to have an effect on gameplay. However, it is nice to see they addressed an issue where forward intel would produce inconsistent minimap zoom functionality. And this is something that's been broken, I believe, since Season 2 Reloaded. And I actually thought they fixed it at one point, but I just got lucky a few matches where it was working properly. More often than not, forward intel just hasn't been doing what it's meant to be doing. And according to the patch notes, at least, that should be fixed finally with the Season 3 update. And then after that, for multiplayer, they just mentioned there will be various stability improvements. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for all of the key things that I wanted to point out with the patch notes as they relate to multiplayer for Season 3. When it comes to the Warzone side of things, we've got a huge list of patch notes there as well. And while I am interested in diving back into Warzone, and I do plan on making at least a few videos here or there when it comes to Warzone, I'm not going to be covering all of those changes. And the big reason behind that is I haven't played Warzone in years, and therefore I have no current context as to how things are in Warzone, and therefore how they're going to be changing with this patch. For me, it's going to be practically like just diving into a brand new game on Thursday anyway. But of course, if you want to check out those patch notes or the ones that I was talking about today, I will leave those linked in the description. And this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about all of this stuff that's going to be changing with Season 3? Are these patch notes getting you more excited for the updates, or maybe not so much? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.